Hello and welcome to MII Media Talks. I'm Natchi Lazarus, and this is the show where we interview top experts in the Christian media space and we discuss topics that are relevant and important for your ministry. Today we are talking about Facebook groups and online communities. We all know that it is an important topic, and to help us with this topic, we've got a very special guest who runs one of the most engaged Facebook groups when it comes to Christian communication. So you're going to find this very valuable. We are discussing multiple strategies. First, we talk about the importance of online communities. Then we move on to how to set up a Facebook group, the setup strategy. We are also going to discuss engagement and promotion strategy, because once you set up a Facebook group, how do you have the ongoing conversations? How do you engage with people? We're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about the type of content you need to post and the various strategies around that. This interview includes a lot of practical tips, so you might want to pull out your notebook and take some notes. And to help us with this topic, our guest today is Katie Allred. Katie Allred is the Assistant Professor of Software Development and Marketing at the University of Mobile. She founded churchcommunications.com, which is the Facebook groups that I talked about. It's an organization where she works and helps 25,000 plus church leaders on their marketing and communication strategies. You will hear Katie talk about this more in detail. And additionally, Katie has previously consulted with Facebook on their groups product. She is a speaker and blogs at katieallred.com. Here is my interview with Katie Allred. Katie, welcome to the Media Talks. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Natchi.
You're most welcome, and really look forward and excited to talk to you about Facebook groups. You have immersed yourself into this space for such a long time that I'm very excited to get into your head and pull out some of the wisdom and experience that you've had. So
Sure.
Let's get going. But before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about you, because all of our audience want to know about you, and they would like to understand where you come from. So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are right now. Give us a little glimpse of your journey so far.
Yeah, sure. So I really started my career in IT, which is kind of funny. It's definitely, I don't think, what people expect. I used to run like Cat 6 and Cat 5 cable all over a university. And with my head like in the ceiling and digging ditches. I don't really know. That's how that all started, honestly. But then I was like, I don't think this is for me. I just remember being knee deep in mud and being like, God, I don't think this is it. I was like, I'm pretty sure that God, you're calling me to something different, not something more. Cause for some people that is it and they love that and that's good. Like God's called them to it. But I was like, I don't feel like this is my calling. And so I actually went and got a master's degree in web design from the University of Florida. And immediately after I finished at the University of Florida, they asked me to teach online. So I was teaching online for the University of Florida. I still do. And then I went to work at Brentwood Baptist. It's a mega church. And while I was there, I did web design and social media management, really web content management, just handling the vast amount of content that was coming out of our churches. And then I did that for about 5 years, and now I'm an assistant professor at a university in Mobile, Alabama, and work with students. We have a digital marketing agency, and I teach digital marketing, I teach social media, I teach software development, quite a wide range of topics. And yeah, so that's a little bit about my journey.
That's awesome. I want to go a little bit into that agency idea. I really liked it when you put that out there. At that time, I hadn't connected with you, but I was just a part of the Facebook group that you have. And I looked at that and I was like, wow, what a cool idea. You had an agency for the students. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the students can decide to join. It's called the Good Work Agency. We do good works for those who do good work. So yeah. So we help churches and work with different nonprofits and stuff, and at a more affordable price because it's students. And with that money, we actually use it and turn around and use it for scholarship for the students. And we go on trips, and we got to go to Facebook just a few years ago and actually lead worship at Facebook, which was really neat.
Wow. Tell us about that.
Tell us about that. Yeah, it was It was great. It's such a wonderful time. I have a great friend who works at Facebook who is a Christian there, and there's a Christians at Facebook group. And so there are Christians that work there, and we were able to meet up with them and just kind of share stories and go through a worship time and service. And it was really awesome and just such an incredible experience. I don't know if many people have probably been at a worship service at Facebook, but we are one of the few that have, or led a worship service and prayed at Facebook. Wow. It was quite the reckoning. So when people are angry at Facebook, I always just tell them, like, to remind them, I'm like, please just pray for the people at Facebook, because they're making big decisions that affect tons of people. And like, there are some really great Christians that work there that really want the gospel to go forward and really are passionate about using the platform for Christ. And so they're really trying to turn a big ship. And I think what we can do instead of complaining is praying for them, and praying for Mark Zuckerberg, right? Because, I mean, he, it has so much weight on his shoulders. And I think that we can pray for him and ask that God leads him to Christ and to, figuring out how he can use that platform for good. And so, yeah. Wow. But, I forgot to mention, I started churchcommunications.com somewhere in between all of that. So I founded a company, a little minor company on the internet. And, it started as a Facebook group in 2015, and I thought 100 people would maybe join. And then it grew. It's at 26,000 today. I mean, God has just really blessed us. And Facebook actually reached out to us back in, I guess, 2017 and said we were one of the most engaged faith-based groups on the platform, which was wild to me. And kind of asked us how we were doing it. And it was it was very eye-opening. I was like, oh, like you people notice? Like, how do you even know? Like, I just thought like I was this anonymous entity on the internet. And before I knew it, people, they had taken notice, and other people had taken notice. And I mean, God's really blessed us. And so we try to help as many church leaders as possible. I've always felt called to minister to ministers, because a lot of them are doing so many jobs alone. You say, I wear many hats. Pastors wear so many hats. A lot of times they are not just the pastor, but the church communicator. They're the graphic designer. They're the, everything for their church a lot of times. Worship leader, even sometimes, youth minister. Yeah. And so I was very passionate about finding those people who just felt like they were doing ministry alone and bringing them into a community where they felt like they weren't anymore. And so that's what we've created. So that's what Church Communications is. Started as a Facebook group, and we've grown to a podcast and a website and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, such a powerful story. I absolutely love that, starting with, just a few people and then going to a level where Facebook wants to know how you do what you do. That's awesome. So on that topic, so we're going to jump into, that's a nice segue into our main topic for today, which is Facebook groups in this COVID season. So how can media ministries and churches use Facebook groups and grow their ministry or create an impact or do whatever they're called to do? How can they do that during this COVID season? I mean, there's been a few months of COVID now. I can't even call it post-COVID anymore, not yet. We still have a long way to go. So what do you see happening? First of all, what are the dynamics? What did you see before and what are you seeing now? Run us through, because you're at the forefront of this whole thing.
Before we even go into Facebook groups, I want to talk about why it's necessary to do online community. But even before COVID happened, loneliness is really on the rise. 60% of Americans felt like they were reported feeling lonely in 2019, which was an increase of 7% from the last year. So 60% of Americans. And then, the percentage of American adults reporting that they have no one to confide in tripled since the mid-1980s. Wow. So, like, it says 1 in 4, like a quarter of people report that they have absolutely no one to confide in. Okay, 1/4 of Americans feel like they have absolutely no one that they can confide in. And so the church is uniquely poised to provide community. Today, I can find good preaching online. I can find good worship music on Spotify, but man, I can't find community online. And I think that the church is uniquely poised to provide that community. What's funny is that Mark Zuckerberg, he went on this journey just a few years ago, I think in 2017, 2018, where he traveled across America. Going back to Mark here, he traveled across America, and people were wondering what he was up to, because he kind of just kept popping up in the most random places. And he was visiting a lot of churches across America. And so what was really cool is that he was asking those churches really specific questions about how they grew, but then also he was asking questions about small groups. He was really interested. So Facebook never released this data, but they kind of told me that groups that are faith-based have like deep and meaningful like connection to people. Like to them, it means that they're more connected to people if they're in a faith-based group. It's not, and there are people who are in groups for, kayaking and hiking, and those are good, but they felt like the faith-based groups, people really felt less lonely because of the faith-based.
Wow, wait a minute.
So,
I have seen that terminology in Mark Zuckerberg's statement, deep and meaningful connections. Oh, he's just picked that word completely from that, I guess. I have seen that because I follow all his town halls and everything. He uses that word, deep and meaningful connection, especially when they went on the February announcement about the groups. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting.
And so, he's seen these deep and meaningful connections, but in these faith-based things, and he wants to bring them into secular, and he's using groups. Like, he turned the entire ship from being about pages and advertising and profiles and that kind of stuff all into groups. He was like, I just want people to be able to create these meaningful relationships using groups. And so he asked churches how they did it. If you think about it, I always say church history, Facebook history kind of models church history a little bit. Because remember, when you're building a church, the first 10 years of building a church is really about just getting people in the door. Like, can I get somebody here? But then the next 10 years are really about, hey, we've got to get people into meaningful groups. We've got to get them into a small group, get them involved and serving in some kind of way, right? It's the same thing. Facebook is trying to do the same thing, right? For the first 10 years of Facebook, it was just about getting people on the platform. But now Mark has realized, I need to do something with these people. They need connection. I want them to serve some kind of higher purpose. And so just like we would, like, we want people to serve, we want them to feel like they're connected. And that's why we put people in small groups. But, that's exactly why we need it, because, I'd read some articles, here that said like COVID-19 poses an unequal risk of isolation and loneliness. Loneliness and stress might actually put you at greater risk for COVID-19. And so how can we help people? I am a single person. So I don't have like family living with me or anything like that. And so for me, if it wasn't for my online connections, especially when we were locked down for about a month and a half that we were, my online connections kept me sane, right? If it hadn't been for them, I was completely here by myself for a month and a half. It was a very odd time for me. And so, I think that we are going to miss it. Let's not miss this really unique opportunity to provide community for people who are far from Christ. And so I have a unique idea about how we can do that without sounding, scary. And so it is a little different. It's about creating Facebook groups that are not necessarily church related. I think that you should create, we can talk about creating groups that are for your church. I think that's really important too. But creating groups that are outside of your church for your community that are not related to the church, groups for kayaking, for hiking, for different interests, maybe it's Fortnite, for, whatever you're into. And, asking 10 of your friends maybe from your church to join it, and then add 10 friends and explain to them like, hey, I'm using this group to create relationships with people who are not in the church. I would like to meet new people. And so I'm telling you what I'm doing. Like, I'm doing this so I can have more gospel conversations with people, so I can have more relationships with people. And then when we start meeting again, when people start hanging out in person, what is great is that you can take these relationships offline at that time, right? You can meet up and go kayaking together. You can do that now. That's perfectly okay, as long as you maintain a safe social distance.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I love that
yeah.
model. I think that's unique, and that's those of you guys in the media teams that you're listening to who are listening to this. You should probably take this idea to your church leadership and ask them to at least experiment with one or two of these groups, because this is like, and it's totally a biblical model. I mean, Jesus didn't always start with the preaching. He
Right. He
went
didn't
out
hand
there.
the
He
people a
said, "Can I?"
Bible and start yelling at them,
Yeah, he said, can I have a cup of water? Can I have a drink? He starts with the different context, and then he comes into the
Right.
gospel. So I think it's a great model. And in the online world, there is so many people looking for these kind of communities around interest areas, like Katie was mentioning, kayaking and cycling and jogging, and within the church, and the church guys want to feel normal too. Like they don't want to always talk about spiritual stuff, but then eventually
Right.
it could become a community that ministers. Such a powerful idea. Thank you, Katie. Thanks for that. So yeah, go on. Take us deeper into the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you could create, I think the thing is like, you don't have to just create, like, I know we talked about a lot of exercise groups. There are other groups. You can create something about knitting. If you want to start a reading book club, like that would be great. Like, don't feel like it has to be, or really you can join a group that's already created. Don't feel like you have to create one. I think I would love it if Christians were in charge of all these groups and we created a bunch. I think that would be fabulous. But I have seen it be successful for people who have just joined other groups and created meaningful, just got active and created meaningful relationships there, and just were conversation starters, in those groups. That has been really effective. Something that is really neat about some of these groups, there was one created right after COVID-19 started, and he knew about my idea about creating these external groups that weren't exactly church focused and didn't have church associated. And so he created one. It's called NELA Needs. It was for Northeastern Louisiana and needs there. It was basically a community response to the coronavirus. So he created this group and just wrote a really great description about a group for sharing and organizing community resources in response to COVID-19. This area is for these areas, like he listed out a bunch of cities, to ensure that vulnerable community members have access to food and housing or whatever. And so within 24 hours, Natchi, they had 4,000 members.
Whoa. Whoa.
Right. Like, what is awesome is that this group will continue after the coronavirus ends.
Yeah.
Okay. And now he has a group of, I think they're up to 7,000 members. He has a group of 7,000 people in his area that he can now communicate with and hopefully start ministering to with these felt needs and different ways. And he could change it to whatever he wants to after all this is over. And I just think this is such an incredible experience. I think it's so cool. But I wanted to share with you this little story that he sent me. So sure. Brandon, he is actually a moderator in the church comm group. And so I asked him, I was like, can you share with me a really cool story that's come out of this? And he was like, yeah, I can. So Gail, this is a woman who doesn't go to his church, a woman that was just in the group. She saw what our group was doing and she jumped in really significantly on her own accord. She started to work with members of the group to deliver groceries. Because in their area, they don't really have grocery delivery. That's not really a thing in their area because they're really rural. Because we're not wanting to touch money, right? The church didn't want to take money from people, deliver. They didn't want to do that. Because we're not wanting to touch money, she kept herself accountable by posting pictures of receipts into the group of groceries she is buying and delivering to people trapped in their homes. So as people are posting food needs, others in the group are sending money to Gail, and she's following through. Probably 15,000 in groceries over the last week, all given from members in the group for the most part. As she's been in Walmart so much, people have started asking what she was doing with so much food. And the Walmart workers themselves actually started giving her money to help for groceries for those in need. And he sent me a picture of the Walmart workers literally giving money to help. And so, it was just such a powerful story of where the church really met needs and didn't even do it intentionally, right? This is a woman who didn't even go to their church or anything, but felt compelled to help. And I think just wow, like how cool is it that our communities can rise up to meet these needs? And I think it's going to be great that they can continue to meet needs after this is over.
Yeah, I mean, and what a great way to witness, and especially in a time like this, as you say, to stand up and say, we are here for you from a stress perspective. I mean, it could be a mental issue that you handle and you create a group around it. As you said, it could be something that meets the needs of people. Just look around and see. So I just want to also get into some practical ways that churches and media teams can look at this. So what would be your input? Do we start with some of the purpose statements behind the church and look at what they want to do and then start some groups? Or should we look at the society and the needs around us and then start certain groups? So how do you suggest we go about that? Because not all churches are aligned with certain kind of vision and purposes that certain groups would demand. So how would you suggest that we go about it?
Yeah, I think really you can create such a variety of groups. And if, your church doesn't support you creating like external ones, like I said, just get involved in one that's already created. I think that's a great way to do it, especially if you don't feel like you want the hassle of being always on, because as an administrator, it really can become a full-time job. But if you do decide to create one, create a private group, don't create a public group. Make sure you name it with your city and what you're trying to do. Don't be cute, be clear about what you're trying to do.
Okay, one is creating. And then once we create, so suppose let's assume that people are creating new groups. So let's just go in that direction and explore that for a minute. So how would they, what did you do to get the group become more visible for people to join? So at this point, would you suggest, ads or what kind of promotions? How do we get conversations or engagements going in a group? That's like a big challenge for most of us.
Yeah, I mean, when we did ChurchCom, we didn't pay for any ads. We still haven't really paid for a ton of ads, honestly. It was pretty organic. But that's why, again, I said naming is really important. Because if you name it something cute, people really don't understand what you're talking about. It's just like in a ministry, like if you name a ministry Apples of Gold, what do you think that means? Natchi, like, do you have any idea what Apples of Gold probably does? Like, I mean, I have no idea, but like, that was a ministry for like young women or something, like young single women or something back at a church I was working at. And, to me, I'm like, I have no idea what that means, like off the top of my head. But if you had just told me this is the young single women's ministry, I would be like, oh, great. I'm a young single woman. I think this would be great for me. Or a mentoring group, a young singles women's mentoring group or something, because that's really essentially what it was. And I'm like, why did we have to name it something cute? It doesn't make any sense. And so just if you can name it something really specific, and then, like I said, invite 10 friends and then ask them to invite 10 more friends. Okay. If you do that, you can get 100 people in a group pretty easily. Okay. And then you could run contests, you could run giveaways, like for inviting people to the group. And then that's an easy way to start some growth so that the group continues to grow. Again, at the beginning of a group, it's really important to create structure, because just like children, relationships thrive in boundaries. Just like children thrive in boundaries, so do Facebook groups and online community. Okay. If there's no boundaries, they do not thrive. They die or they are ran over by spam bots. Okay. So you really have to create these really specific rules, and then you have to enforce them. But also not just like rules, but you have to really tell people what to do, because not more than what to tell them not to do. You really have to tell them what to do, because honestly, like, people won't participate if they aren't told what to do, because they're like, I don't know, this is just like any other. I'm a member of 500 Facebook groups. Why would this one be any different? Yeah. And so you really have to think through what is something unique that we can offer that will be different and be entertaining and engaging and matter to them really specifically, right? And so for us, we created some weekly topics. And so I do recommend weekly topics. I think that's a great idea. If you were doing like a kayaking or hiking group, you could create like share with us every week your hiking pictures, right? You could do that, or like tell us your favorite hiking location or whatever, or your most recent hike. For us, we do like, what are you working on Wednesdays, and blog post Fridays, and jobs on Monday, because a lot of times these things will reveal themselves because people will share this content repeatedly, and you'll be like, I want this all in one place. Yeah. And so it's easy to create these boundaries sometimes, but it's important for you to think about, what do I want this to be like? And do I want it to be, you know, family oriented, or do I want it to be professional or whatever? That's kind of up to you, because it's your playground at the end of the day. I think a lot of people think, well, groups grow and whatever, and nobody has anything to do with them or whatever. And it's just not the case. Like anything, you have to put a lot of effort into it to make it work. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, if there is one takeaway, if for me at least from this, it's the fact that what you said in terms of don't tell people what not to do, which is what most of us do. You know, you start a page and then immediately you go to the rules section, and then our Facebook has got a set of things which is like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. I've actually never heard this said in many places, that you tell people what to do. That is so powerful. So I just wanted to reinforce that is such a big takeaway for today.
It really reminds me of youth group. You know, I can remember being in student ministry as a kid and being told repeatedly again and again what not to do with my life. And because that's what the church is good at. We're great at telling people what not to do with their lives. But here's the thing, I really needed to be told what to do with my life.
Exactly. I love that.
And so I was like, okay, I know I can't do all these things, but what can I do? Like what? And so I just remember being really compelled. I was like, if I'm a minister, I want to tell people what to do, not what not to do. And so I really took that to heart, even in my like groups ministry, right? Like I was like, I really want people to understand, like, these are the things they're free to do, and like encourage them to actually do those things more than like tell them what not to do, if that's possible.
So once we get the ball rolling, let's say we got 10 people and then a few people are joining and we got something, and we keep asking these questions, we get some engagements. Do you think it's important for churches and ministries and media ministries to think about exclusive content for the groups, or can they post something that they post on the page? Because one of the big questions that keeps coming up, especially in churches, is, okay, we've got this group, what are we going to post? Because we are posting everything on the page, right? And and we want to minister to people. So does that mean I need to do another video, for which I don't have the time, you know? Like, so what would you say to that?
So, you know, this is back to like creating a group for your church, not the external thing. I think the external thing needs to live on its own. And yeah, you would need to create different content because this is not for your church, right? You're not posting a video about Jesus in your kayaking group. Because we really want the kayaking group to just be about kayaking. And then we know that life change happens in the context of relationship. And through that relationship, we can then introduce somebody to Jesus. We're not just throwing Jesus in their face to begin with. So that, I think that is separate. So let's think about internal groups now. So we're kind of changing the tide. Okay. So an internal group, they're great. Having a group for your church is great. You can connect it to your page, but let's differentiate. A page is really the front door of your church. It is where you hang a pretty wreath. You share stories of life change, of what's going on in your church. Those kind of things. But the group is really like a living room. It's really where you can share announcements. You can get more into the nitty gritty. You can do social learning units. You know, you can do a Bible study, those kind of things. You can set up different groups for different ministries. That's what I recommend. So don't set up, I mean, you could set up one group for the whole church, of course, but I would say don't set up different pages for different ministries. At the beginning, nobody was using groups. So we had set up so many pages, right? The youth ministry had a page, children's ministry had a page. And before you know it, you have 20 pages, and that's not good because organic reach on a page is really low. So reaching the people that you're actually trying to communicate with is very hard. So what I would say is actually close all those pages. I know you're like going to hate that. You're like, no, I worked so hard on this page for 20 years. You know what? I would say keep your main church's page, and that's it. And then if you want to funnel children's ministry content to the people on the page, allow them to do that. But then create a ministry group. So create a group for children's ministry, create a group for student ministry. And then do you want to reshare the content from the page into the group? You can. I don't think there's a problem with that. I would actually, instead of just sharing it into, I would just upload directly, because I'm telling you the reach on a page is so low in comparison to a group. And you might say, well, I'm going to increase my reach by sharing it into a group. It doesn't really work that way. It still doesn't really like it. Actually, that's one of my rules is you can't really share page content into our group, because it really actually decreases the group's effectiveness. And so they really want you to stay in the group, not on the page.
Are there any tools that you use? Would you recommend using Facebook directly, or what is the best way and efficient way to do that?
Yeah, Facebook has a scheduling tool built in, and they have some moderation tools that are pretty great. But it actually isn't as locked down as it used to be. It used to be really locked down. They've opened it up for a lot of different apps to work in Facebook groups. So I would think Buffer and Hootsuite still work with groups, but I use tools that are for evergreen content because I like doing those weekly posts. And so I use tools like Recur Post or Social Bee. There's quite a few, anything that will allow evergreen content to be posted into a group. Those are typically the tools that I use.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for spending your time. There are lots of golden tips there. I especially liked your comparisons, which we never thought of, saying church history is comparable to Facebook history. And then, raising kids is comparable to how you think about Facebook group people. I like those comparisons. Thanks so much, and lots of value and practical wisdom. Truly appreciate it. So before we close, tell everyone how they can find more about you, connect with you if they wanted to, if they have any questions. What's the best way to connect with you and learn more about all that goes on in your life?
Yeah, you can join the group. That's one great way. So you can go to Facebook, literally search for Church Communications with an S, and you can find us there. You can also go to churchcommunications.com, and you can go to katieallred.com. Yeah.
There you go, guys.
Oh, add me on the Instagram, KatieJAllred.
Yes, on Instagram. And we'll have all these links on the show notes. And you guys, this group is one of the most valuable things that you could do, and things that would add value to your ministry. So go ahead and check it out. Katie, once again, thanks so much for being on Media Talks. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Yeah.